hype, hype. Come with me tonight's the night. Get to see, I wanna be with you. Hype, hype. Come with me tonight's the night.
Hello people, what is going on? Back again with another video. To my right, you know who he is, Sloth from Bubbling Irons, and we're here to talk about West Ham start, summer signings, and Julian Lopetegui, Messiah or not. Steve, Sloth, how are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. I think it's I try not to get too bogged down by the early results, and obviously we're gonna talk about that going forward. But I think there's a lot to be optimistic about for the season. I am looking outside and seeing all this horrible grey weather and thinking, God, I wish we had European football so I could get an away touring. But you know, it's not too bad. That's our aim for this year, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I agree, mate. That is our aim for this year. How have you perceived the summer for you in regards of, like, first off, Lopetegui coming in, and then the signings that Steiden and Lopetegui have made?
Well, I think the switch to Lopetegui was never going to be anything other than chaotic West Ham and David Sullivan. Let's face that first and foremost, because I think there was absolutely no pattern or planning to how we were going to say goodbye to David Moyes, and I think that was always going to be the logical thing. Like on Babbling, we did a video just before the new year, and that was when we were flying, and we were basically saying, you know, I myself said, if he keeps performing like this, he kind of has to earn himself a new contract. But obviously then the wheels came off a bit, and I think part of that you could say was down to the board and perhaps not wanting to back him in because they felt there was already a change that was needed. And it was interesting to see how, I think it was like ships in the night. There was no plan from them both, and it was 3 or 4 weeks before the end of the season they just went, oh yeah, David Moyes is leaving. And so I think there was always going to be this sort of awkward handover phase, and Lopetegui was not the one that I think a lot of us wanted. You know, when you flirt with the likes of Amarin and you kind of get linked with all these glamorous names, I think it's very difficult to kind of then bring yourself back down to earth, where you realize, actually, you know, there's a reason he was head scout at Real Madrid, and you look at some of the players he's brought in for the clubs that he's managed, and you think you can start to understand it a bit more. And it was a strange one when he was appointed, because, as we mentioned, you know, those very high prestige names we were linked with, and then a manager out of work seems like the typical Sullivan cheap option.
True, very true.
I think when you look at it overall, he's a very competent tactician, and he has a very flexible way of approaching games. And I think that just means that when you're going from such a set style of football that David Moyes had to something different, and let's face it, a big rebuild in the summer, I think it was a good decision, and one that for the long term could be the right one for replacing, maybe, you know, 2 seasons down the line, or if it doesn't go that well, I think at least you've built yourself a base for the next person coming in as well, whether that's in a positive place or a negative place. I think you've built that base.
I completely agree with what you just said there. That's what I believe was going to happen, Sloth, if I'm being honest. I think West Ham are building up for the next man. I think Lopetegui comes in and I think he's going to. I think Lopetegui will be fine at West Ham. I'll be honest. I think he's going to be a man who comes in, galvanises everyone, bringing some really quality names. And then I think the next person, I think West Ham will be eyeing up the next manager in the near future. I think they're going to stabilise everything right now, right after the Moyes thing. And listen, the Moyes thing last year, you probably covered it on your channel as much as I covered it on here. It was toxic beyond toxic, and like it was getting to a stage where you can't even say anything positive because you're a sort of flip flopper or a Moyes lover or Moyes hater or whatever. So it was bad last season, don't get me wrong, but it's nice to have a new manager, fresh ideas, and a new approach to a point. I think a new approach to games is different now, which we're going to get into also. Obviously, the summer window has been and gone. What did you make of the summer window, Sloth? Because we signed 9 players. Was that too many? Did we need more? What's your thoughts?
It's a really tough one to try and sum up because I think we had such a big job to try and complete that there was always going to be a huge overhaul needed. And whether we, tried to approach that with just bringing in players and keeping on as many as we had, or keeping the quality sort of spine to the team and building around it, which I think we've done, it was always going to be a massive job for anyone coming in. And I think we did quite a lot of it very well. I kind of look at the transfer window as a very positive thing overall, but it's the same old story of recent seasons gone by where we just haven't got a striker who suits us. And I'm a big fan of Fulkrug. I think he will offer a lot going forward. I think people, it's kind of a bit like with the Moyes situation where you mentioned, it's you can't seem to say anything or back someone without someone going, no, he doesn't suit us and it's a terrible transfer. Whereas you and I both know that X has basically said the fee was much lower than it is being reported as. And it's very easy to look at Duran and say, well, he was only twice or, £15 million more. And yet, why did we sign Fulkrug? And I think you're basically building a squad of forwards. You've got 2 strong centre forwards that you can build with. And if you want to put Bowen up top, or if you want to put Kudus down that middle, then you can do that. I think it's just a shame that this window we didn't go out and get a striker who would naturally get the best out this side. But it was
Are you
always
surprised, actually? Like, for me, I'm surprised. Like, when I look at this, I'll be honest. When Tim started come in, I think we'd all agree to a point that the main position at West Ham United would have been centre forward. To replace Mikel Antonio would have been the main one. Like, before anything else. Like, maybe obviously the defence was an issue last season where it was so bad and we could see loads of goals. But knowing that you've had Mikel Antonio, and this is no disrespect to Mikel Antonio, I say it quite a lot. All good things do come to an end, and you need to replace that man with someone younger, fitter, fresher who can score the goals. Now, for me, I agree with you on the Fulkrug situation. I think there's a lot of pressure on him considering look how well Duran's done. Like, Duran's done amazingly well, and then you look at Fulkrug, who's not really sort of done anything of any note as yet. So I think there's pressure on that. I am surprised that West Ham didn't pinpoint a striker for the last year and go out and go, right, that's the guy. And if it was Duran, and they identified Duran as the main target, they should have went out and gone all out and got him. Just like, the only issue with that is that it's a toss of a coin job. If it comes in, he doesn't work out, the fan base will say, well, you spent a lot of money on this man, right? Did we really need to spend it? If it does work out, then he's regarded as a messiah. Are you surprised in regards to that, though, Sloth? In regards of basically that West Ham haven't pinpointed that striker, and it's like Fulkrug's like a sort of short-term fix to a long-term problem.
I have learned in recent seasons never to be surprised about what West Ham do with strikers. Yeah. I think it's such a difficult position for us to try and fix, because it just seems that we can't do anything right. But what I do think they've done this season is they've looked at it and gone, we know that Bowen can provide us with goals. We know that Kudus can bring in goals. And we know to an extent that Antonio can still provide a source of goals. You know, he can provide them in terms of himself or with assists. But I think just as importantly, they've gone out and fixed that left side. And Summerville, yeah, it's early doors, but I think he's looked really bright when he came on. And, you know, had he finished that chance against Bournemouth, I think we'd be going, oh, what a start to his career. And I think so early on, it's difficult to really, you know, form a full opinion of how they've fitted in. But I suspect they've looked at the attack and gone, if we address overall, you know, depth in certain areas, then we don't have to rely as much upon a centre forward, or we can switch things up and move Bowen down the middle if necessary. And I suspect that they will be looking at ways to try and bring in a striker long term who will be cost effective, someone younger or someone coming through a system somewhere, and they'll go, actually, you know what, he can fit us, and then we don't have to spend £45 million on a striker. And you know, if the opportunity arises to sign someone like Duran, then we can do that, but it's not as such a detriment to the rest of the squad, because I think a big point of this summer would have been, we can sign Duran for that huge amount of money, or we can add depth elsewhere and keep, like, you know, you can maybe get Todibo and Kilman, or you can just get. And I think when you look at how much money we've moved out in terms of wages, and we've taken quite a big hit on a lot of the players we've moved on, then I think it kind of starts to. It's not the best thing for a fan to look at and be like, oh God, you know, we're cost saving. It's planning, but I think with how strict FFP and all of those kind of things are now, I don't really blame the club for being that strict. I think there's method in the madness at West Ham at the moment, but whether it's successful or not is something that only the season will tell us.
I think when it comes to the transfer window, I think West Ham had a good transfer window, but there's just two things that sort of slightly sway me a little bit. The striker front with Krug it's a big move, like to go from a 20-year-old up and coming player. And you are correct, I will give you this, that we need to go out and get a player that is up and coming and develop him like Villa have developed him into the player that he currently is. So I do agree with you on that. I look at sort of the centre-back positions. You let Aguirre go and you're looking at free transfers to try and cover that spot, when really you should be letting a youngster go into that spot and giving him an opportunity. Do you know what I mean? We as a fan base, what I've noticed ever since I've done YouTube is we do moan about not giving the youth a go, and then sway away from it when we say about giving the youth a chance because they're not ready. So you like, there's two ways to look. You can't have it both ways. You can't say you want the youth to give them a chance, and then when they do, when we say about giving them a chance, you say that they're not ready. So there's that. I think the signings that we've made have been brilliant to a point in certain key positions. I'm going to run through a few of them right now. What do you make of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, mate? Because I think he's the best signing for me personally out of all of them. What are you saying, Sloth?
I think he could be the transfer of the window. I've been so impressed with him in the recent games, and you know, we were kind of talking about him in a few videos where we'd said, you know, going forward isn't his strongest element, but there is a lot to build upon there, you know, because he is big, physical, strong, and he's quick. And it's just about him finally developing that area of his game, and that will make him a complete right back. And I think in the games that he's played, you would have to say he looks like a complete right back. He is showing a lot more of the player that we saw at Crystal Palace than the one we saw Man United, and I think for £15 million, it's an absolute bargain. He looks quality so far.
What do you make of a few? Well, I'll run through them quickly. Obviously, League One Wes, we've signed him on a free. I think we all know he's the third choice goalkeeper. What do you make of Lewis Guilherme, mate? Because I'm going to be honest, I see him live over Dagenham and Redbridge through the pre-season. I thought he looks decent. I think this is a slow burner with this lad. I think he's going to take a little bit of time for him to develop into the player that they want. Do you think it was wise West Ham going out and spending that money in the summer, looking back now, rather than obviously because he was our first real big money signing this summer?
I think I completely agree with you in terms of the slow burn transfer. I think he's one that if we'd moved for him, well, if we'd waited longer, I think there's a chance we could have been at the running before we even kind of like make a move. I think he's got the potential to be a top class player, and he is very, very young. I know that we mentioned about academy players and people go, oh, I want to see this player given a chance, or we want to see Couture more, or we want to see someone from the Championship brought in. Myself, I wanted Philogene. But I think when you look at the overall nature of the deal, how young he is, and then you put that into context that, I think had he stayed in Brazil and played a full season of football for them, I think we'd have been priced out completely. And it's about moving now and then getting this player in for the future. And I do think that, as you mentioned, he's going to be a slow burn. He's going to need to be brought in off the bench, and fans are going to need to be patient with him. But he's got all the skill sets to really develop. And, we're talking about the fee that we've paid for him, but a lot of that is in the add-ons, and it's easily spread across. There's lots of little payments in there. So I think the headline figure makes you go, oh, that's a bit risky for West Ham. But I think it's because we're not used to planning long-term with transfers. And particularly when it's someone so young, I think the last player that we signed where everyone was going, wow, this guy's talented, was Savio and Serco. And that naturally makes West Ham fans go,
I know. I still have nightmares about that. I think he had made nine appearances, or 10 appearances, and then was shipped off to Florentina, I think it was.
Yeah. But I do think there's a hell of a player there, and you look at the fact that he's got all the skill sets to succeed in this league. He's incredibly quick, he's absolutely rapid, but he can carry the ball really well. And he's also shown that he's got quite a tidy finish. So I think bringing him off the bench, hopefully when Summerville's fully fit and bedded into the squad, he'll be starting more on that left-hand side, or Peta might be on there, but bringing pace off the bench is huge. And I think that's something we've lacked. And, if we're 1-1 against Ipswich and it's 60 minutes in, if you've got a young lad on the bench, you can go, look, go out there, show us what you can do. Just run at them. Just go out there and give them problems. That is a complete game changer, because it's pace is so difficult to deal with. And when you have pace like his, it's a potential game changer. And
that is one thing with us that I do agree with you on, that I am seeing pace in his side now. Like from years gone by, ever probably since when Lingard was here, when you had Lingard, Benrahma, Bowen, and Antonio as that front four, it's frightening. It's very, very good. And I think now when you look at the standard that West Ham are going to, West Ham are going up to a level that I probably have never seen. Like all for the 37 years I've been supporting West Ham, this is the best West Ham side that I've probably witnessed, as a whole. Do you know what I'm saying? There's been individual mavericks and players, don't get me wrong, but as a sort of team selective and, a long-term vision, I can see it to a point. We've discussed Krug. Obviously, we think it's a decent signing, but it's going to time will tell. Todibo, for me, I thought he's a great signing. I think if we can get him in there and do his thing, then he'll be a great signing. What's your thoughts on John Clare?
I think he's a fantastic defender. One of the things that we were very keen to stress was that he was very much the progressive defender in his centre back pairing at Nice. He was next to Dante, and Dante is an absolute powerhouse, but he's not the most mobile. But he will win everything in the air, and basically Nice were, relying on him to win the knockdowns, and they push it out to either their left back or right back, or just let Tadibo carry it forward. And I think the good thing at West Ham is that he's going to have Max Kilman to do that, who's a lot more mobile, not as dominant in the air. I think Dante, anyone who has watched Dante will know what a powerhouse he is. But I think when you have the potential of two young centre-backs who can both do the same sort of thing, I think Tadibo is a little bit of a level above Kilman in terms of how he carries the ball, his passing range and ability on the ball. And that's not a disrespect to Max Kilman. I think he's been great as well in the few games that he's played for us. But I just think overall he's that little bit quicker, a little bit better on the ball. And I think when you look at the signing as well, the fact that it's a loan to buy, I think it's a sensational bit of business. I really do.
Yeah, I agree, mate. 100% agree. A loan with an obligation to buy at the end of the season, it helps us free up cash for other options. I agree totally with you. I think him coming in with Kilman, when they're both ready, we're going to have two centre halves who know how to defend and defend properly, and also can play at the back. That's a key thing. If we're going to play at this back under this style, then we need two ball playing centre halves who can do it, and both of them definitely can. I will get to Soler. Obviously, I know not a lot about him. All I know is that he was very good at Valencia. He looked very good in the clips that I've seen. Any thoughts on Soler for you?
I'm pretty happy with him. I think, as you mentioned, he was fantastic at Valencia, and he was their captain for a while. And he is someone who is not just got a creative spark to his game. He's also a hard worker, and I think that will be what has kind of said to Lopetegui, you can move on James Ward-Prowse with him coming in, because I think he has a lot of the similar skill sets and not quite the same free kick. He is good at set pieces, but let's face it, it's not James Ward-Prowse on a free kick. Although we didn't see that, but yeah. I think that's a different matter. I think he is an excellent footballer and an excellent professional by all regards. He was kind of shoehorned into this PSG side to appease the manager who was coming in, because they appointed the Spanish manager, whose name I've completely forgotten now, but Soler was basically one of his top targets. And he came in, was meant to appease the manager, didn't really play that much in terms of starting games, but then he was put right back. He played a couple of games at left back, right midfield, left midfield, and I think he was used as very much like the utility man. And the fact is, he didn't have a bad game while he was at PSG. He was basically Mr. Reliable, but he was out of position for a lot of it. And I think that when you look at the skill set he has, because he is surprisingly quick, not like absolutely rapid, but he's quicker than James Ward-Prowse, and he's a bit more agile. And I think that he will be a very useful player for us, and his work rate on top of his ability on the ball, which he loves a trick, and I think he will be someone that could potentially really win themselves as a fan favorite for West Ham fans, because he does love to send someone the wrong way or do a bit of flair that will get West Ham fans up off their feet. And I think there's less of the risk taking that Peta tends to do, but the same sort of style and ability on the ball.
What would you say his best position is there for Soler?
I'd say it's central. It's centrally. He can be centre mid, but he can also be central attacking mid. And I think that's going to be really important for West Ham as a whole, regardless of what happens with Paqueta. But in terms of covering, You know, we can play Paqueta in a three with him, or we could look to just rotate him in and out and ease the burden or workload on Paqueta a little bit as well. But he can play out on the wings. As I mentioned, he is quite quick, so it could potentially be an option for us. But I think he is potentially 25 million euros. Could be a very, very good buy.
Yeah, 2-year loan deal. It is good, I must admit. Moving on to Rodriguez. Now, this man was the man that I think no West Ham fan saw coming to a point. Just comes out of left field completely, and then all of a sudden he's at West Ham in the kit. Away you go. What have you made of him? Because I think he's a decent player. I think he's a little bit slow for the Premier League. I'm going to be honest, but other than that, I think he can do a job for us. What are you saying on his arrival, mate?
Yeah, I agree with you in that he's not the quickest. I think he's definitely adjusting to the league. But I think in terms of his physicality and his ability on the ball, I think he's growing, and it's that little mindset of having a bit less time on the ball and knowing that, which I think in the first game he looked a little bit exposed. I think because he was new to the Premier League, and he struggled a little bit with the pace. But I think against Palace he was excellent, and for periods against Manchester City, I thought he looked very sharp as well. So when you are comparing him, you know, Aston Villa have got a great midfield, and I think on that day Onana completely bossed it, and it's those are the kind of measure or yardstick you have to have for yourself as a midfielder coming into the league. You need to be looking at those players and going, I can compete with them. But it's one thing to do that after not quite having a pre-season, or, you know, coming back from an international trip and an entirely new team. So I've been impressed with him, particularly from the Crystal Palace game. I just thought he really dictated the play well, and he linked up with the defence. He was that much needed conduit between the likes of Paqueta and our attackers and that back line. And I think that's something we've lacked a consistency with in recent seasons. But I think, especially on a free transfer, it's a brilliant bit of business. And, you know, we mentioned the academy side before. I don't think you can over stress or I'm losing my words here, but you can't put into words just what it means for these players to have a World Cup winner in and around the club. And, you know, if they can see him and think, this is what I need to be at that level, or this is what a champion is made of, then it should be a huge confidence boost for those youngsters coming through. And I think it's a really good deal, especially on a free transfer, but to add that depth into the midfield as well for us.
Crescencio Summerville we're going to come to. I'm going to leave Max Kilman till last. For me, Crescencio Summerville, I think, is a very, very good player. I think when we signed him, I think there was a lot of excitement in the air. He hasn't really been given the opportunity as yet from a starting position, other than against Bournemouth in the League Cup. What have you made of West Ham? A, signing a good left winger for once, and someone who can actually like beat people and do stuff, and B, the signing it as a whole for you.
It was really interesting because he's someone I really wanted at the club from the start of the summer. And I think when you look at how the window panned out, I think Leeds put their price, or they made their price very well known, and they wanted a lot of money for him. And I know there's this reported clause that was rumoured, and I think it felt like there was never really any other competition for him, for his signature. So I think we did quite well there in how we moved for him. I think the fee is very good. You know, when you look at what we paid for Ben Rama, I think it's a great deal. And as much as I liked Ben Rama, one of my frustrations with him was I felt he had a lack of pace. You know, he could beat a man and he had him over that first couple of yards, but then he'd never get away from them. And I think Summerville just completely changes that. He can do the skill, but then he will just leave them for dust. So he's exactly what I like in a winger, in that pace and trickery, but also he's got the work rate. And I think if you know anyone who watched him for Leeds last season, sorry, I think will be excited. He is someone that I think can really add a lot to this attack. And like I mentioned, you know, with Fulkrug, I think they would have looked at him and said, you know, if he can get us, say, 15 goal contributions, whether that's, you know, 10 goals and 5 assists, whatever it might be, then we have a really strong base to the attack. And I think that will have been part of the thinking behind going for him and adding him into that attack. And as I said, you know, adding pace into it as well, because when you look at Gilherme, Kudus, Bowen, and Summerville, then you've got electric pace that you can, you know, rotate about and bring someone off the bench to add to. So I think it's a really smart deal.
Yeah, listen, I think he's a great little player. 22, Dutch, left-sided. He's exactly what we need. Like, we've needed someone on that side who can carry the ball, and only carry the ball with intent. That's what I believe with him. I do believe that he should be given an opportunity after the international break to come in and play on that left-hand side in the Premier League game. And I think if you can balance it out with him, Kudus, Bowen, and then sort of work off of that, that'd be interesting to see. But we're going to talk about that after this final rating of a player, and a player that me and you had backwards and forwards over the summer, right? And that is Maximus Kilman. Honestly, Sloth, I'm going to be real. Like, you probably covered it on Bubbling Irons also. During the sort of pre-season, I watched him, and I was like, yeah, he's decent, but I've not seen a 40 million pound player. The moment the Premier League kicked into gear, I've started to see a 40 million pound player plus. What have you made of Kilman's arrival to West Ham United, mate?
I've been impressed with him. I think it's look. I'm not defending the 40 million pounds, by the way. I think we both agreed that it's like that is a lot to pay for a player, but I think for a 2-footed, homegrown English, you know, potentially international. I know he's got a few caps, but I think when you look at the fact that the market is the way it is, it's annoyingly and somewhat bafflingly about the price you'd put on him.
Yeah,
and I think he's performed, as you said, to a 40 million pound level. I've been really impressed with him, and one of the things that we kind of talked about on Babbling was when you have confidence in your centre back or your centre back partner, it completely changes how you play as a defender. And you know, you might be more willing to take risks, but also you will know that if you try a pass and it doesn't quite come off, or if you get dispossessed, you've got the cover. You've got someone who's going to be there, and you can pull someone's shirt. You might pick up a yellow card, but you've got someone there, so you're not risking getting sent off. And last season we didn't have that. And you know, I think the confidence in Zuma, and I'm not trying to dogpile in on him, but I think the confidence in the centre back partners last season, I think, was gone, and I think you could tell at times. So that immediately looks settled. I think Mavropanos looks a much better player because he's playing with someone that he's got confidence in. And I think, you know, when you look at the fact that I think Todibo is going to be coming in after the international break, I think he'll be the first choice one. And we'll see the defence go to another level, in my opinion, just because I'm a big fan of Mavropanos, but he can be incredibly frustrating with his decision making at times, and I just think Todibo will kind of smooth that out. I think he'll be a far better choice in that position, but he has everything that will make a centre-back partnership confident and thrive, in my opinion, because he's quick, he's strong, and his reading of the game is such that he will know when to fall back, know when to cover, and as I said with Tadibo, someone who's that bit more progressive, they won't have a doubt in their mind about being able to carry the ball, because they'll know that Kilman will drop back. And the same with Saka, if he's his right back partner, he knows that Wan-Bissaka is going to drop deeper and allow him to take a bit more of a risk. If he wants to get forward and if he wants to link up with Bowen or carry the ball towards the edge of the area, our defenders are going to allow him to do that. So I think Kilman has really helped change the dynamic of the defence, and I've been really impressed with him so far.
I'm going to be honest. I've got to take the L on this one because I got this one complete and utterly wrong. When I watched him in pre-season, I watched him over Dagenham Rugby. I thought, yeah, he looks good on the ball, etc. Defensively, okay. I'm going to be honest. Then I watched him in America, and then both them games, I thought, oh, I don't know about this. This is not right. But then what you just said, if you've got good players next to you, then you're going to make other players better. It also works the other way. If you've got crap players next to you, it's going to make you look worse. So, ever since then, since he's come in to the Premier League, I'm going to be honest, he's looked very good. The assist for the Bowen goal against Crystal Palace was an excellent assist. I don't think we've ever seen that with a centre half at West Ham coming out with a conviction and just laying a lovely pass in right to our sort of centre forward or right winger, so to speak. So yeah, listen, I'm pleased with it. I think with the Kilman situation at the start of the summer and the price tag was always going to weigh heavy on his shoulders because it's a lot of money for a £40 million Max Kilman from Wolverhampton Wanderers. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think he's paying that back slowly but surely, and I think it will end up becoming a very good signing for West Ham. But I do think when you look at the defence, if you sort of picture that defence and say, right, what's your best starting four in a defensive mould? Wan-Bissaka, Tadibo, Kilman, Emerson. That's a pretty good four, considering last season we had Zuma, Aguerd, and Mavropanos at points in that sort of fold. So, yeah. Couple of situations moving on there. After we spoke about these sort of signings, there's three situations for me that I want to discuss with you and see what you think. I don't know how you've been sort of judging it on babbling. The first situation is Thomas Souček situation. How do you perceive him now? Because is he going to be a bit part player, or would he be coming back in and after the City game? How do you see Thomas Souček, mate? First off.
I think he's going to be a huge part of the squad. I don't think he'll be a starter outside of, say, cup games. I think, particularly if we go through against Liverpool, or if, say, in the League Cup, or sorry, the FA Cup, if we get drawn against a lower league side, he's exactly the kind of player you want to start because we love Peta, but I think if you're putting him against a League Two side, they're going to just kick him and try and wind him up. Whereas Thomas Souček's just going to take all that kind of abuse and he's not going to get fussed. He's going to do a job. And I know he's the way I've always described him is as a blunt instrument. He's not going to be, he's not always going to have the best first touch, and he's not always going to be pinging 30-yard passes. Probably very rarely ever going to be pinging 30-yard passes, but he will give you maximum work rate. He will give you aerial dominance, or at least an attempt at aerial dominance, unless he's playing against someone like Onana, who can do that, but with that added element. He's going to give you a lot of guarantees, and I would love to see him at the club for a long time, because I think bringing someone like that off the bench, rotating them into the squad is incredibly valuable. And, if you're trailing 2-1 and it's the 70th minute and you're thinking, right, we can't really figure out a way to beat them. We're putting balls into the box, but no one's on the end of them. Who better than to bring on off the bench than Thomas Souček, who you know is just going to run and run and run and try and get on the end of things. I think he is very easy to kind of deride, and rightly so at times, but an incredibly valuable tool. And we know he's a professional as well. And modern football is a lot of things, and you can talk about player power and how much that influences the dressing room. But I think when you have someone like Thomas Souček, who you kind of know isn't going to kick up a fuss, that is another thing that is incredibly important.
I think he also has to be treated with a bit of respect, Sloth. Like, I think what he's done at West Ham, and he proved it last year for me, the amount of goals he scored in the 90th minute to win us games. Like Forest, Burnley, Everton, even the goal that got us on our way against Arsenal away from home. Like, he was there. And even so far as this season, the goal at Crystal Palace, he knows how to score goals. I do agree with some people when they say about he can't be playing from the start. I get their sort of argument there because we need to be more dominant, and we can't have a Thomas Souček who's a bit clumsy to a point on the ball and receiving the ball, etc. It proved it with one of the goals this season. I think it was from the Onana situation against Villa, like clumsy corner goes out and then they score from it, and that's because of Souček's control. So I do agree with you 1000% with Thomas Souček. I'm glad Souček's here. I think I'd rather have someone who's prepared to fight and bleed for this club rather than someone who's just prepared to pick up a pay packet, so to speak. Moving on to the Lucas Paqueta situation. Right, this is an interesting topic of conversation. I hear this quite a lot through a lot of people on Spaces, TikTok, everywhere. What do we do with Lucas Paqueta, mate? Because he's playing in a three-man midfield. Some people are, and I'm going to bring it into sort of the Kudus situation and all, to compare them both. Kudus is playing on the left, Paqueta's playing in a three-man midfield. Do you like him in that sort of situation? And should Kudus be moved from left to right to a point?
I personally, I think this season, with the fact that, you know, we mentioned the striker situation, I'm not against putting Bowen as the central player and making him the forward, or using him more in that position and putting Kudus on the right. But I do think that as much as, you know, we just spoke about Summerville and his work rate, I think Paqueta gives you that and a great link up with Emerson in that left wing position. So it gives you options. And I think as much as I like him centrally, he does have a habit of giving the ball away, and then that can lead to the counter attacks. Or, you know, like against City, he gets a poor pass played into him from Emerson and the ball is given away and they score. I think if it's, you know, if he's in a left wing position, you have more players behind you to alleviate that risk. So it's about kind of weighing it up. And I did get frustrated when he was in that left wing position a lot like last season, because he doesn't have the pace that we want in that position to break forward. But I do think it got the best out of Kudus, because he would find him with his passes. And I think it's going to be a really interesting bedding in process. And, you know, if we look to move him onto that left side and utilize him there, or if we're going to put Kudus in the middle and have him and Paqueta linking up, then it's going to be something that takes time. But I think there's always a goal or a chance or creativity from Paqueta, regardless of where he plays.
I think what it is with Paqueta for me, Sloth, is that where he's so in the midfield, he's in the heartbeat of the side to a point, like, and he's the link up from the defence, basically through to the midfield, moving on to the attack. I don't trust him enough to be there without not giving the ball away. Right? Don't get me wrong. I want him to be a bit. For me personally, I want him to be a bit further forward, probably as a 10, someone who can sort of receive the ball in that sort of 10 position, 35 yards out from goal, and play balls through the middle or down the sides for Bowen, Kudus, Summerville, whoever, Fulkrug. So I do look at him in that position in the midfield and think that we're trying to shoehorn players in, like, because you can't drop Lucas Paqueta, you can't drop Jared Bowen, you can't drop Mohamed Kudus. So you've got a problem. There's always going to be one player, in my honest opinion, is going to be out of position. Now, when I look at the right hand side and I look at Mo on the left hand side, that really I feel like we're losing 20% of Mohamed Kudus on that left hand side. I don't know about you. What's your thoughts on him being on the left, mate?
I don't think it's his best position, but I also kind of think that we have a luxury at the moment with this quality players, and you can almost have a fluid front three, and try saying that multiple times quickly.
Yeah.
A fluid front three,
Yeah.
where they can interchange and mix things up, and I think that might be the idea going forward. But personally, I think it is something that Kudus, he always offers threat, like regardless of where he plays. But as you mentioned, that 20% could well be a goal. It could be an assist. It could be whatever. And I personally, I think I'd stick Paqueta at left wing and play Kudus centrally, just because I think he's going to give you a bit more cover with Emerson as well. And that link up play, as I said, is fantastic. But also, he's going to be playing balls centrally, and he's going to be delivering them into the box, which I think, particularly if we're looking at Fulkrug as well, could well mean the difference between him getting 5 goals or getting 10 goals with, assists coming in from either side or into his feet. I think it is disappointing in terms of he does lack that pace, but when you have so much pace elsewhere and you have someone like Emerson and him offering that overlap or the work rate that they give you, then I think it kind of balances it out from the games that we saw last season where he played left wing.
Yeah. For me, I'm not too convinced with him on the left. I think when you've got one of the best dribblers in the league, someone who can pick the ball up, I agree with you. As a 10, don't mind it. I don't mind him picking the ball up and being that number 10 and running through the heart of someone's defence or midfield. I think he's strong enough. We all know that. But on the right hand side, I think if you get him on the right and get Bowen up front, I think that would be the idea. I think what it is, and it all circles round the sort of Fulkrug situation to a point. If Nicholas Fulkrug comes in for Fulham, and hits the ground running straight at one, then that argument's null and void altogether. I think if he doesn't come in and we're still relying on Mikel Antonio to come in, I think it won't be before too long that Bowen will go up front, Kudus will go on the right, Paqueta goes to 10 and Summerville will go on the left, and then you probably go with 2 holders like Rodriguez and Alvarez as a sort of make weight for that position. Before we sort of move on, what do you think of Bowen up front, in your opinion? Because a lot of people are very mixed with it. Some people say he's not centre forward. What are you saying?
I think when you score goals, it completely eradicates the criticism of him not being a centre forward. He's done it enough. And just quickly going back to Fulkrug, I think he creates the space. And like against Palace, that Kilman pass is fantastic. But if you look at Fulkrug in the middle, he creates doubt in the centre backs and pulls them over by sort of arcing his run, and that's what gives Bowen so much space. And one of the things that I've kind of been critical of Antonio of recently is that he tends to get drawn over towards Bowen as opposed to creating space for the players around him.
True, yeah.
And I think that Fulkrug really understands that. And when you look at, he may well create goals by doing little things like that, or create chances. But I think if Bowen is the one who's finishing them, then eventually you have to say, well, you know what, this guy needs to start, or we need to be looking at how we get more goals from our striker option. And if that means Fulkrug is off the bench, or Antonio's off the bench, and Bowen starts up top, because he's got the option of a runner who can make those spaces for him, someone like Kudus and Summerville, if it's on the left-hand side, people creating space or getting in behind defenders and delivering into the area, then I think you have to outweighs the negative of playing a different sort of forward.
Yeah. Listen, I completely agree. I completely agree. I think for me, when it comes to the Bowen situation, he scored a hat-trick last year. He scored 10 goals, I think, or more, loads of assists. I think it's a no-brainer. Obviously, what you just said about Nicholas Füllkrug, I completely agree with the Palace situation. He did take the player away. And he's more of an intelligent striker than Antonio, because Antonio isn't a centre forward as note. He's just got into that position and tried to make it his own. So I completely agree with you, 100%. What is your expectations now after the international break, Sloth? Like in regards of basically West Ham moving forward, because we've got a busy week when we come back. We've got Fulham, Liverpool on the Wednesday night, Chelsea at 12:30 on the Saturday lunchtime. What are you saying, mate?
I think we've got to set ourselves quite a high benchmark. I think we've got to have a target of, say, European football. And I'm expecting, once this team is fully bedded in, fully fit, because that's quite easy to forget that, we're 3 games into the season, but not a lot of these players are fully fit. Some of them have been coming back from international competitions, or they've just come into the club, and they may not have Lopetegui's demands for fitness. So it's about that bedding in period, and this international break is going to be very important for building that fitness. And say someone like Alvarez, just coming back from injury, he's going to hopefully reach peak fitness soon. But I think we've got to have a good high target, and if we aim for, say, 7th, then if we fail slightly and finish 8th, in my eyes, that's still a decent first season for Lopetegui. But I think with the quality of players we've brought in, you have to set high goals. And for me, I think we should be looking at the Fulham game and going, right, we need to get 3 points here, because that is going to set us in a good place. And Fulham will probably be thinking exactly the same thing. We're a big team in transition, and we've got a lot of new players. Potentially they can try and capitalise on it. But we need to look at our quality. And to be honest, after last season when we got thumped by Fulham, I think we should just be putting that on the dressing room wall and going,
Yeah.
go out and get revenge.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I think if you're chasing Europe, you have to go to Fulham and not lose. I think it's as simple as that. Fulham are a good side, but I think when I look at us, we're not, I ain't gonna say head and shoulders above them, but we are significantly better than them in sort of many departments. I look at it like moving forward after the international break, we've got quite a big month to a point. I think we've got Brentford coming up after that, and then we've got Ipswich, and then we've got another international break. So it's going to be interesting to see how West Ham cope, like coming back into the fold. Who do you reckon starts before we wrap this video up? Who would you say sort of comes in for Fulham? Because there's talk of Füllkrug coming in to Debo. Does Paqueta stay where he is, or does he get moved further forward? Because for me, Sloth, this is a game where West Ham have to attack this game from the front. Like 4-3-3 against Fulham, not for me. 4-2-3-1, you go all out because you need to win. What are you saying?
I think Tadibo has to come in. If he's deemed fit enough, that is, I think he should be coming in, starting. And after the international break, you want to sort of see the sort of 11 on paper that you expect or going forward. And for me, I would put Tadibo in now. I'd also like to see Summerville start. We know that they're going to have pace on either side in those wing back positions. And I think that Summerville will be chomping at the bit to get into the side. Personally, I'd like to see him come in, but it's as we mentioned, if Paqueta plays in that middle position and Kudus goes on the left, then it's I still think he's incredibly dangerous there. But it will be interesting to see who we pick. I think we'll go with hopefully our season ahead the strongest 11, and I wouldn't be surprised if Summerville's on the bench, but I personally would like to see him start.
What do you make of obviously Liverpool on the Wednesday, getting Liverpool in the League Cup? After that, there's no point talking about the draw because we're here all night. But how should West Ham approach that game? Because obviously, if I've got this right, we play Liverpool on the Wednesday, and then we've got Chelsea at 12:30 on the Saturday afternoon. It's a big sort of turnaround. Like, do you go strong against Liverpool and try and get through, or do you sort of look at it and go, right, you give Summerville a chance to get to Debo in there? How would you approach it for you?
Personally, I think you've got to go strong. I think maybe this is me being a bit harsh, but I was having a chat with my dad earlier in the week, and you know, we were watching the cup draw in a pub, and I said to him, you know, it's interesting because had Moyes still been in charge, I'd have been looking at that going, oh bloody hell, Anfield, well, we got no chance. And now I think there's enough question marks about how we approach it and Lopetegui's style that I think, you know, we can go there and give them a game. So I personally, I want to see us attack it. I want to see us go there and look at a cup as, you know, a serious thing that we're pushing for. It will be incredibly hard against Liverpool, but I just think we have enough depth now that we don't have to be too concerned with playing our strongest 11 or, you know, strongest 8 or 9 players with a couple thrown in there that, you know, are maybe from the academy and or would normally be on the bench. So I think it will be really interesting to see. As I mentioned, these players are still finding fitness, so I don't think that at this point in the season they should have too much difficulty going from the Wednesday to the Saturday. But you never know. I think if Lopetegui is impressed with what he sees, regardless of the result on the Wednesday, he might say, we have one rest day, or we have a session that's a bit lighter, where it's, you know, it's more gym focused, something, or recovery focused. But I think it's important for the fans as a whole that we go there and we actually, you know, try. We go there and put out a full or a strong side.
Yeah, I think also where it's only a 90-minute game, that sort of helps us to a point. Like, if it was extra time and penalties and all that, then yeah, it's a bit longer. But I think with a 90-minute game, I think you can sort of swallow that to a point. Any final thoughts for you, Sloth, before we make a move?
Oof, I think it's something that's going to be really key this season is a little bit of patience. And I know that that's a big ask in modern football, but I think that when we're looking at getting all these players bedded in, where we've come from having quite a small squad now to the luxury of a bit of depth in places, you know, players who are coming on aren't going to be necessarily match fit or completely at the races at this point in the season. But I think as a whole, it's just try and enjoy a bit more of an attacking approach. And yes, Lopetegui isn't always the most attack-minded, but I think that if there's one thing that we've seen in the game so far, it's that we're not playing boring football. We're playing pretty well, and we're at least going at sides. Even the Villa game, I thought there was enough there to be proud of. And yeah, it was frustrating, particularly the Souček miss. But I think that when you look at the fact that Villa finished 4th, you know, they've got Champions League football, and the fact that we've just played the champions, who I think we gave a game for good periods of the match. I think there's enough there to be confident about. And yeah, hopefully we'll be on this at the end of the season going, wow, you know, European football again and a few more away tours.
I think what you just said's correct in regard to patience, but I do think performance has to come into it also, and results. I think if West Ham, i.e., for example, was playing really well and losing every week, I think people would go, well, hold on a minute, we're not getting the results which deem our performance worthy, if that makes sense. So I do understand what you're saying. I think patience is key, but I do think with us, I think where we've been on that high for so long, and obviously now we're not in Europe now, having one game a week, I think we can assess it as a fan base as a whole to a point. I think this Lopetegui's done okay since he's been here. I do think there's little things that I'm not too keen on with the like Kudus on the left and Paqueta floating around in midfield. I think that's an issue to a point. Not having a centre forward pinned in and saying, right, that's your centre forward, and going with the old guard, i.e. Mikel Antonio. But I think the next sort of coming months will, as we build up towards Christmas, we will know where we're at with Lopetegui. And what you said at the start of this stream, and I do agree with you 100% on this. I think West Ham are building for the next manager. I don't think Lopetegui is the long-term vision of West Ham. He ain't going to be here for the next 5 years. I think West Ham are building this side up, so this side becomes attractive to a up-and-coming manager to say, right, look at West Ham, look what they've got: Mohamed Kudus, Bowen, Alvarez, Paqueta, and then try and sort of lure someone in. I think trying to lure an Almiron in last season with Zuma, Aguerd, Sufal, etc., it just ain't going to wash. But if you've got a core side there, and people say, well, look at this side, this is quite an up-and-coming side, I think you can attract a higher-end manager. But that will remain to be seen. Sloth, thank you very much for coming on, mate. I really do appreciate it. Shout out your channel. Everyone knows where to find you.
Yeah, my Twitter's at WestHam Sloth. I've got a silly mock-up picture there, so you'll know which one it is. But yeah, Babbling Irons will be trying to put out as much content as possible. We've been trying to do more in-depth analysis into each goal and chances that we get. So any feedback, if you guys like it, if you dislike it, please let us know. We'll try and take as much of it on board as possible.
Yeah, go and follow Babbling Irons. Good channel. I've known the boys for a while. I've had some disagreements with Frankie, but that's another story. I've had some backwards and forwards with him over sort of transfers and stuff. But you know, it is what it is. That's the joy. You have an opinion, you stick with it, and you walk away as friends rather than enemies. So yeah, go and follow Sloth and the boys over at Babbling Irons. Also, subscribe to this channel at all. E20 Zone TV. Smash a like on the video. Hit the notification bell, etc. If you like this video, I'm going to be trying to do a few more of these with other channels and other influencers, so to speak. And if you know anyone who you'd love on, DM me on Twitter or put a message in the comment section below, and I'll get them on. If they want to come on here, they can. Like, this is an open platform. So yeah. Anyway, have a good day wherever you are, and I will see you again in the next one. Peace.
Hype, 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 hype.